the table and says, "You people really do know how to serve." Laughter erupts, but Naomi doesn't flinch. She just walks to the mic, clears her throat, and says, "Before we continue this wedding, there's something you all need to know." Phones rise. The room stills. And then she adds, "You're standing on land I own." Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us, where are you watching from? Share in the comments below. The vineyard shimmered like a magazine cover. Rows of golden grapes glistened under the sun-drenched sky of Napa Valley. Elegant crystal chandeliers dangled from tented ceilings, flickering in the California breeze. Every detail of the Whitmore-Harper wedding had been selected to perfection. Imported orchids, custom calligraphy menus, and a baby grand piano flown in from France. It was the kind of wedding Pinterest dreams were made of, and Chloe Whitmore wouldn't let anyone forget it. Chloe stood near the archway draped in ivory silk, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Her diamond earrings sparkled like daggers, her lace gown sculpted for headlines. A former pageant queen turned influencer with 1 million Instagram followers and a mother who belonged to 6 country clubs. Chloe had learned early how to mask cruelty with a perfect smile. Everything must look luxurious, tasteful, and white, she had said during a final walkthrough, not realizing, or not caring, how those last words hung in the air. Across the lawn, Naomi Clark stood at the edge of the vendor's tent, silently adjusting a tray of champagne flutes. Her posture was straight, her expression unreadable. She wore the standard black button-down uniform, blending in easily with the other servers, yet there was something about her that didn't blend at all. She moved with quiet authority, grace beneath pressure. Even in anonymity, Naomi had presence. Her skin glowed in the golden light, and her tightly coiled hair was pulled into a bun that revealed high cheekbones and intelligent, focused eyes. She was the kind of woman people remembered, even if they didn't want to.
Naomi didn't need this job, not really.
She had agreed to this catering gig last minute, a favor for her college roommate's older sister, who ran one of the most exclusive event services in the region. It was a Saturday, and Naomi usually spent weekends reviewing property data and fielding investor calls for her burgeoning real estate company. But she said yes, partly because her mentor always reminded her, sometimes, proximity teaches more than power. And today she was deep in the belly of power. As she arranged a tray of hors d'oeuvres, Naomi overheard a coordinator telling a group of ushers, "Please limit any non-essential engagement with the waitstaff. Keep interactions minimal. The bride doesn't want distractions." Naomi's hand froze momentarily over the tray. Noted. She caught the eye of another waitress, a Latina teen who looked like this might be her first event. The girl's lips trembled slightly, eyes darting to the floor. Naomi gave her a slight nod, steady, sister-like. The girl visibly exhaled and adjusted her posture. Naomi had been here before. Not this exact vineyard, but this exact situation. She had attended high-end prep schools on scholarship, interned at white shoe real estate firms where people assumed she was part of the janitorial team, and once overheard a client say she spoke surprisingly well for her background. That had been 6 years ago. Now she quietly managed over $9 million in residential and commercial holdings across the Bay Area. Her startup was still under the radar by design, but one day soon, it wouldn't be. Still standing here as just another waitress in a world so ready to diminish her, it tested her discipline. Make sure the napkins are folded the French way. Not however they do it where you're from, a voice barked across the aisle. Chloe. Naomi turned her head slightly. Chloe hadn't even looked her in the eyes. "She's not talking to you," a white server whispered under his breath, chuckling nervously. "She talks like that to all of us. It's just how she is." But Naomi knew. Chloe was talking to her. And only her. She caught glimpses of guests arriving, mostly white, mostly affluent, the kind who wore generational wealth, like invisible armor. Naomi kept moving, setting up the final champagne tower, while her mind drifted to her late grandmother's voice. "Dignity is armor, baby. It doesn't protect you from bullets, but it'll shame the shooter." "Excuse me?" Chloe's voice sliced through the air like a knife. Naomi turned. Chloe stood in front of her now, radiating bridal confidence and barely contained contempt. Her eyes narrowed as they scanned Naomi from head to toe. "You with catering?" she asked. "Yes," Naomi replied, tone measured, professional. Chloe smiled, not the kind that reached the eyes. "I don't know how to say this delicately, but the overall aesthetic here is luxury, elegance, timelessness, and you're a bit too urban for the ambiance. If you know what I mean." There it was. A bullet of a sentence, fired point blank. Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she held Chloe's gaze with a calm that unnerved the bride more than any outburst could have. Chloe's smirk faltered for a millisecond. Naomi didn't blink. "I'll take that into consideration," Naomi said flatly, before turning back toward the serving table. But Chloe wasn't done. She stepped closer, lowered her voice, and whispered something that would haunt the space between them for the rest of the day. "Just remember, you're here to serve, not to be seen. Try not to embarrass yourself." Naomi felt the words drop like ice into her chest. Her fingers tightened slightly around the silver tray. The air between them thickened. For the first time that afternoon, the breeze died down. Chloe blinked, as if she sensed something shift, but she couldn't name it.
Naomi didn't respond. Not with words.
She turned slowly, walked back to the main tent, and set her tray down with surgical precision. But inside, something had cracked, not her pride, not her composure, but the seal that kept her truth hidden. Today wouldn't end the way Chloe imagined, and the bride had no idea, absolutely no idea who she had just insulted. Chloe, still smug, doesn't notice the sharply dressed older man watching the entire interaction from beneath the vineyard arch. He frowns slightly, eyes fixed on Naomi, then takes out his phone and begins dialing. Naomi's name already in his contacts. Naomi didn't move at first. She stood still, as if frozen by the impact of Chloe's whisper. Her fingers grazed the tray of untouched champagne flutes, but her mind was thousands of miles away, tumbling backward through a tunnel of memory. Because this wasn't the first time someone had tried to shrink her in a room she rightfully belonged in. She was 13 when a teacher in her elite prep school handed her a donation form, meant for cafeteria workers. At 15, a mall security guard followed her around as she shopped for prom shoes. She remembered walking into her first real estate investor pitch at 23. Blazer crisp, business plan memorized, only to be asked, "Are you here to take notes for someone?" Now here she was, a black woman with Ivy League credentials, a portfolio most developers would envy, and the kind of composure that frightened people who fed off perceived inferiority, being told again that she was just the help. "You don't belong here, sweetheart." The words hung in the air, like perfume, invisible but choking. Naomi drew in a shallow breath. She knew that speaking up, defending herself, asserting her worth, all of it, would only brand her as angry, aggressive, or worse, ungrateful. These were the silent calculations black women made every day in white spaces. Instead, she did what she had mastered since adolescence. She swallowed the bile of rage and bitterness, turned the heat into calm, and wore silence like steel. But this time, her silence wasn't weakness. It was power. Chloe walked away, heels clacking against the marble patio, oblivious to the subtle war she'd just ignited. Naomi adjusted a napkin on the corner table, her movements precise, deliberate. She didn't need to say a word. She would let her presence speak for her. The photographer, a woman in her 30s with an eye for subtext, lingered nearby, pretending to adjust her lens. She had caught the tail end of the encounter. She didn't know what was said, but she knew the look Naomi wore, the one that said a line had been crossed. Behind her camera, she snapped a photo. Click. Naomi in profile. Back straight. Eyes fixed in the distance. Click. Chloe smirking at her bridal party, unaware she'd just painted herself in a new light. Guests nearby began whispering. Some looked away quickly, choosing complicity over confrontation. Others watched with uncomfortable curiosity, unsure whether to intervene or stay invisible. A tall man in a seersucker suit looked between the two women, then turned to his wife and murmured, "She doesn't look like a regular waitress." Naomi heard it all, every word etched into her bones. She walked over to a corner near the pergola, temporarily hidden from the crowd. Pulling out her phone, she opened her personal notes app and typed in bold, "Racist confrontation. 2:47 p.m. Bride, Chloe Whitmore. Witnesses present. Maintain professionalism. Dignity always." It was a habit she had developed over the years. Document the wounds, even the invisible ones. Suddenly, the sun shifted slightly, and a shadow fell across her. Naomi turned instinctively. There he was again, the older gentleman in a charcoal suit, standing half-hidden behind a flowering trellis. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, and his gaze was sharply fixed on Naomi, not Chloe. He didn't blink when she met his eyes. For a brief second, Naomi's pulse spiked. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place it. He nodded once, just enough to be seen. Then quietly, he stepped back into the crowd and disappeared behind the clinking glasses and string quartet. Naomi stared after him, unsettled. She turned back to the main tent, just as a new wave of guests arrived. Influencers, CEOs, bridesmaids in blush-toned gowns. All of them were smiling, laughing, celebrating. Naomi couldn't help but think how effortlessly some people floated through life, never having to carry the weight of being other, never having to calculate how much space to take up, never wondering if their mere existence would offend someone's curated atmosphere. She smoothed her apron, adjusted her bun, and walked forward. No one needed to know her truth just yet. But if today kept unraveling this way, her silence might soon have its own spotlight. A groomsman, tall, white, and clearly already drunk, stumbled toward the refreshment table and smirked. "You're too pretty to be serving," he slurred, eyes lingering too long. "What are you, like, a model or something?" Naomi kept her voice even. "Just doing my job, sir." He leaned in closer. "Bet you get into a lot of trouble. Girls like you. Girls like you." Another sharp jab. Another calculated assumption. Naomi took a step back, maintained eye contact, and said with measured chill, "Enjoy the champagne." Then she turned and walked away, leaving his smirk to collapse behind her. The moments kept piling. Microaggressions dressed in tuxedos and pastel gowns. A woman clutching her purse a little tighter. A guest asking if Naomi had ever been arrested before getting a real job. A teenager snapping her fingers and saying, "Hey, over here." The message was consistent. "You don't belong here, sweetheart." Naomi moved like a conductor through it all. She gave no one the satisfaction of watching her break. But behind her composed mask, something else was brewing. Not rage. Not sadness. Resolve. She passed by a reflective window pane and caught her own image, tall, graceful, and undeniable. It reminded her of who she really was beneath the borrowed uniform. Yale graduate, fluent in French, founder and CEO of Clark West Properties, with holdings from Oakland to San Jose. A woman who had already out-earned many of the guests in attendance, and yet was still seen as background noise. That was about to change. And somewhere across the lawn, hidden among the hydrangeas and linen-draped tables, the man in the tailored suit pulled out his phone again. This time he didn't just dial. He spoke softly into his earpiece. "She's here," he said. "And she's exactly who I thought she'd be." As Naomi begins walking toward the kitchen, a server stops her, pale and anxious. "You should see this," he whispers, handing her a phone. On the screen, Chloe's private Instagram story. A photo of Naomi pouring drinks with a caption that reads, "Serving struggle with a smile. Bless her heart." Inside the bridal suite, the air was thick with perfume, prosecco, and privilege. Blush-colored silk robes rustled as the bridesmaids lounged across velvet fainting couches, their voices bouncing off the mirrored walls like harmless gossip. Only it wasn't harmless. Not when it stripped someone bare behind their back. Chloe sat at the center, reapplying nude gloss, glowing with the kind of audacity only wealth without empathy could afford. "Did you see her?" one bridesmaid whispered, feigning innocence while passing a crystal flute. "The waitress? The one with the, statement hair? She looked like a BuzzFeed diversity post." Laughter rippled. "Small and mean. She's got attitude too," another chimed in. The way she looked at Chloe, like she had something to prove. "Honey, you're handing out shrimp skewers, not stock tips." Chloe's mother, Margaret Whitmore, emerged from behind a vanity mirror, pearls swaying like judgment incarnate. "We paid for elegance," she said coldly, sipping her rosé, "not attitude." A stylist tried to smooth a curl that had bounced loose from Chloe's updo. Chloe batted her hand away. "I just don't want the pictures ruined," she said. "This is going on Vogue weddings, and that energy doesn't photograph well." No one said her name. Naomi. They didn't have to. Erasure was part of the game. Meanwhile, outside the tent, Naomi stood stone still, her phone still lit from the image she'd just seen. Chloe's private story post mocking her, serving struggle with a smile, bless her heart. The bile rose in her throat, but she forced it back down with a long breath. She could feel the heat radiating from her spine. Not shame, not sadness, something sharper. Her tongue burned with everything she wanted to say, but had learned not to. She knew the moment she spoke the truth, they'd twist it, turn her into the aggressor, the problem. She tucked her phone away slowly and turned, heading toward the reception tent, dignity cloaked around her like armor. But the hits kept coming. A groomsman, shirt slightly untucked and eyes glassy from too much Dom Perignon, stumbled toward her holding 2 champagne glasses. He tripped slightly over a stone paver, the liquid from one flute sloshing onto the hem of Naomi's slacks. "Oh," he said with a mocking smile. "Looks like someone forgot how to walk." Naomi stiffened. She looked down at the spill, then up into his drunken smirk. "Clean that up, Cinderella," he said, dropping the empty flute into a nearby planter, and walking off before she could reply. The world around her didn't pause. A string quartet continued their Vivaldi. Guests sipped cocktails and nibbled canapés. No one noticed the indignity, or chose not to. Naomi bent slowly, not to clean the spill, but to center herself. Her hands hovered over the damp cloth, heart pounding with a silent rage that had no name. It wasn't just this moment. It was every moment, like it, the ones no one saw, the ones never posted, never punished. And as she knelt, another moment came crashing back. She was 16, standing in a powder-pink dress in the middle of a private school gymnasium, a winter formal. Someone had rigged the voting. Naomi had been voted, most likely to end up on reality TV, by a student body that called it just a joke. Her date, a shy Jewish boy from honors chemistry, suddenly ghosted her mid-dance. Later she'd overhear his friends say he didn't want his future resume to include B. That night she cried alone in a bathroom stall, swearing she'd never let anyone see her break again. Back in the present, Naomi straightened up, brushing the front of her uniform. She didn't wipe the champagne stain away. She let it sit, a mark of truth no one else would carry. A familiar server passed her by, gave her a sympathetic glance. Naomi nodded, grateful for the unspoken solidarity. Then her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out quickly, expecting another insult, another sting. Instead, her breath caught. Offer received. 1.2 mil for the Franklin Street building. Full cash. Buyer requests 48-hour close. The words danced across the screen, like a divine interruption. Naomi blinked, rereading it twice. Franklin Street, a neglected duplex she'd picked up 2 years ago for $380,000 during a downturn. She had spent weekends quietly fixing it up, adding equity, resisting pressure to flip it to gentrifying developers. Now her patience had bloomed into 7 figures. Her lips parted slightly, not in a smile but in revelation. Here at this racist playground of manicured roses and $400 table linens, her real power had arrived. Clean, legal, undeniable. She took a slow breath, eyes scanning the wedding like a chessboard. Suddenly, the pieces looked different. She tapped a quick reply to her broker, voice inside her whispering, "Not yet. Let them finish their games first." Just then someone touched her shoulder lightly. Naomi turned. It was the photographer, the same woman from earlier. I hope you don't mind me saying this," the photographer said gently, "but you carry yourself different, like you're not supposed to be serving anyone here." Naomi stared at her, surprised. "I'm not," she said, voice low, steady. The photographer paused, then nodded slowly, understanding more than Naomi had said. "If you ever want someone to capture your story, the real one, call me. I shoot more than weddings." She slipped Naomi a business card, then melted back into the crowd like a ghost. Naomi looked down at the card, fingers tightening, and for the first time that day, she smiled, not with joy, but with purpose. From across the lawn, a soft chime echoed from her phone again. A new message appeared, but not from her broker. It was from a name she hadn't seen in years, Leonard Vaughn. The message read, "We need to talk. I'm here, behind the trellis." Naomi's thumb hovered over the message on her phone. "We need to talk. I'm here, behind the trellis. Leonard Vaughn." The name struck like a spark in a gas chamber of memories. It had been nearly a decade since she'd heard it last, but it echoed now with the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. Leonard Vaughn wasn't just another name in the real estate world. He was the world. A ruthless, legendary investor with properties from Silicon Valley to Harlem. And more importantly, he had once been her father's fiercest rival, and secretly, his closest friend. Naomi's heart stumbled against her ribcage as her feet began moving, almost involuntarily, toward the back of the venue. The trellis stood elegantly behind the tent, wrapped in wisteria, and half hidden by garden lanterns. Guests didn't wander there. It was too quiet, too far from the champagne towers and curated playlists. And there he was, Leonard Vaughn. A little older, his salt and pepper hair more silver than she remembered. His custom Italian suit hugged a frame still regal with posture, and his eyes, sharp as broken glass, softened when he saw her. "I knew it was you," he said, voice low and velvet smooth. "I saw the way you didn't flinch." Naomi folded her arms slowly. "What are you doing here, Mr. Vaughn?" Leonard chuckled lightly. "Let's just say I was invited by the father of the groom. But I stayed for something far more interesting." His gaze didn't drift. It was as though he were seeing her and her father side by side. "You've grown into him," he added, after a pause. "Into your father. He'd be damn proud." Naomi's throat tightened. She hadn't heard his name spoken with that kind of reverence in years. Not in this world, where her surname wasn't met with admiration, only confusion or dismissal. She glanced back toward the party. Chloe's laughter pealed in the distance, high and shrill. The injustice of it all thudded in her chest like a dull drum. Leonard followed her gaze. "She doesn't know, does she?" he asked. Naomi shook her head. "None of them do, and that was by design." After her father's death when she was 19, Naomi had inherited everything. Dozens of rental units, 3 commercial properties, a half-renovated boutique hotel in Oakland. But he'd made her swear to build her legacy in silence. "Let your name be last on the roster, and first on the deed," he used to say. "Don't chase clout, chase control." So Naomi did. While her college classmates posted internship selfies at Google and Goldman, Naomi spent summers in hard hats and tenant meetings. She learned zoning codes, mastered 131 exchanges, and took out business lines of credit in the dead of night. Now at 28, she held deeds to over 30 properties across the Bay. She just didn't advertise it. Even here, at this wedding, she wore invisibility like armor. A $35 work shirt and $20 flats. Her Rolex stayed locked in a drawer at home. Her company name, Clark West, never mentioned her full name. To the world, she was just another server. "You're playing chess while they're Instagramming checkers," Leonard murmured, as if reading her thoughts. Naomi smiled, barely. "They'd never believe who I am, or that I could own something they want." Leonard arched an eyebrow. "You still have that Franklin duplex?" Naomi nodded. "Just got a $1.2 million cash offer." He laughed under his breath. "You could triple that by next year. Let me know if you want to partner up." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why now?" Leonard leaned in, voice lower. "Because I'm tired of watching brilliance hide behind silence. Your father played defense his whole life. I think you're ready for offense." A text buzzed suddenly. Naomi glanced at her screen. From Serena. "Girl, you should have worn your Louboutins to this circus. I would have paid to see their faces." She couldn't help but laugh softly, the first real laugh of the day. Her best friend always knew when to inject levity into a storm. Naomi typed back quickly. "It's not over yet," then paused. Her finger hovered over the option to call a ride home. She had a choice now. Leave, with her head high and her worth untouched. Or stay, and watch the cracks in Chloe's porcelain world widen. She looked out across the vineyard, where the golden light spilled over guests who still didn't see her. The servers who looked like her moved quietly, eyes down, spines bowed. The guests who looked like Chloe laughed louder, sipped more champagne, and floated in the illusion of entitlement. Naomi could walk away. She had walked away from worse. But then just then she spotted movement near the flower arrangements. A small figure. A little girl. She was no more than 7, wearing a poofy white dress and a crown of baby's breath. One of the flower girls. Her cocoa skin glowed like polished mahogany, and her curls bounced as she skipped. She looked up and spotted Naomi. Stopped and tilted her head. "Hi," she said, a little shy. Naomi bent slightly. "Hi there." The girl looked around nervously. "Are you okay?" Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" The little girl stepped closer, voice just above a whisper. "I saw the fancy lady say something mean to you earlier," she said, eyes big and honest. "My mommy says people like her don't like people like us sometimes." Naomi's breath caught. The little girl reached out, gently touching Naomi's hand. "Why are they being so mean to you?" Naomi knelt beside the girl to answer, but before she could speak, the photographer appeared behind them, breathless. "Naomi," she said urgently, "you need to see this. Someone leaked a video. It's going viral, right now." Naomi knelt slowly, her knees brushing the trimmed grass as she brought herself to the little girl's level. The child's eyes, wide, brown, unflinching, held something that rattled Naomi far deeper than the insult Chloe had whispered hours earlier. It was fear. Not loud or panicked, but the quiet inherited kind. The kind passed down through generations of whispered warnings. Don't talk back. Don't make a scene. Don't forget you're different. Naomi recognized it instantly. She had worn it herself, wrapped around her like an invisible coat all throughout childhood. She had learned early to make herself smaller in rooms filled with people who thought her presence was an intrusion. "What's your name?" Naomi asked gently. "Amara," the girl whispered, voice like a tremble against the breeze. "Amara," Naomi repeated, offering the name the reverence of a blessing. "That's beautiful." The girl's shoulders relaxed slightly. Naomi glanced around. The adults were too busy posing with cocktails and adjusting their sunglasses to notice the scene near the flower beds. Just as well, some truths weren't meant for them. Naomi leaned in closer. "You saw what happened earlier, didn't you?" Amara nodded slowly. "She said something mean to you." The bride. Naomi's jaw clenched. She didn't need confirmation, but hearing it from a child, stripped of any filter, made the truth hit harder. Amara looked down at her white ballet flats. "She does that to people like us sometimes. My mom says to just smile and stay quiet." A sharp pain stabbed through Naomi's chest. Not physical, but something crueler. She looked at Amara and saw herself. Not just her younger self, but the entire line of black girls taught to package dignity into silence, taught that resistance was impolite, that rage was dangerous. Naomi placed a hand gently on Amara's shoulder. "You never have to stay quiet when someone disrespects you," she said, voice rich and sure. "Your voice matters. Don't let anyone make you feel small, especially not people pretending to be important." Amara stared at her, then nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight of Naomi's words. From behind them, the sudden burst of camera shutter clicks shattered the moment. Naomi turned sharply. Chloe stood just a few feet away, posing next to one of the bridesmaids in front of a decorative arch, a phone camera in one hand, a champagne flute in the other. But what Naomi saw, and what Chloe didn't realize, was the glance Chloe gave to Amara when she spotted the girl next to Naomi. The slight twitch of her upper lip, the split-second eye roll. The disdain wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was casual, well-practiced, automatic, the kind that didn't see children, only categories. Naomi's stomach turned. Then, almost as if on cue, Chloe sauntered over, her smile suddenly bright and performative. "Well, hello there, sweetheart," she chirped at Amara, crouching down just enough to seem involved, without ever actually connecting. "You look so precious. Let's get a little selfie." Amara shrank slightly. Naomi stood, instinctively placing herself between them. Chloe held up her phone and snapped a photo, tossing a filtered smile over her shoulder. "Oh, this one's definitely going on my story," she said without a trace of irony. "Gotta show how diverse the wedding was." Naomi felt her stomach twist into knots. Then Chloe turned, raised her brows and added, not to Naomi but to her phone, "Live recording. Gotta support the little ones. Teachin' class, you know." The cruelty wasn't in the words. It was in the tone. The theater of kindness. The masquerade of progressivism that dripped with condescension. Naomi's fingers itched. She pulled out her phone. And in one clean, practiced motion, she snapped a photo, not of Chloe posing but of the moment, just before, the micro-expression of disgust. The unfiltered sneer Chloe had worn the second she thought no one important was watching. It was the kind of image that spoke volumes, the truth behind the filtered facade. Naomi's eyes narrowed. She knew where this kind of photo belonged. Scrolling through her apps, she pulled up a private Instagram account, Vows Unveiled, an anonymous but wildly viral page dedicated to exposing weddings riddled with scandal, racism, and hidden cruelty. It had hundreds of thousands of followers. Brides dreaded landing on their feet. Naomi hesitated for just a breath, then uploaded the photo. Caption: Napa Valley. Bride stages a kindness photo with a black flower girl. Moments after rolling her eyes at her, "Class isn't couture." She didn't sign her name. She didn't have to. Within 30 seconds, the post had over 3,000 likes. She turned to see Chloe now laughing with her bridesmaids again, completely unaware. Naomi looked back down at Amara, who was quietly twisting the hem of her dress. "Hey," Naomi said, kneeling one last time. You're not alone in this, okay? Amara nodded slowly, a hint of something flickering in her eyes. Courage, maybe, or belief. Naomi gently ushered her back toward her seat, where her mother sat, eyes alert. The woman gave Naomi a nod of gratitude that said everything and more. Naomi turned toward the garden's edge, phone still warm in her hand. The photographer appeared beside her, breathless. I told you it was big, she said, handing Naomi her phone. Naomi's eyes widened. The video had already been picked up by Weddings Gone Wrong, a TikTok channel with over 1 million followers. Someone else, maybe another server, had recorded Chloe's tone-deaf commentary, her dismissive gestures, her staged smile. The comments were exploding. This is performative racism. How's she gonna treat a child like that? The mask always slips when no one's supposed to be watching. The photographer looked at Naomi, then whispered, It's only just begun. Just as Naomi slips the phone into her pocket, her own device buzzes again, this time with a message from a restricted number. We know what you did. Careful where you step next. The photo uploaded just minutes earlier, Chloe's unguarded sneer at the black flower girl, captured in an instant of undisguised disdain, was no longer just a digital post. It had become a spark. And the internet? The internet was gasoline. Within an hour, it was everywhere. On Reddit, it appeared on the front page under Our Wedding Shaming with the title, Bride Goes Full Karen on Flower Girl. For clout, gets caught. On Twitter, the hashtag #RacistBride2025 began trending in under 40 minutes. By the time Naomi returned to the catering tent, her phone was vibrating non-stop. The reposts, duets, and commentary cascaded through timelines with savage velocity. Influencer pages that usually posted brunch aesthetics were now dissecting the video like cultural forensic scientists. Who stages a photo with a black child for diversity points while mocking her behind the scenes? Chloe Whitmore just ended her own wedding, and her brand in one breath. This ain't your fairy tale wedding, sis. It's a PR horror show. The video clip, posted anonymously by the photographer, revealed Chloe in her rawest, most damning form. Her tone when speaking about the girl, her fake smile, the eye roll, the muttered gotta teach them class. Even without Naomi's name, the post hit like thunder. And then came the commentary. Sharp, biting, unrelenting. Oh, she practiced that white savior energy in the mirror. Imagine raising a black child in America, and seeing this at a wedding. This is why representation without respect is useless. Naomi sat in the catering tent, her back straight against the folding chair, watching it all unfold, with a stillness that was almost eerie. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to scream. The world was screaming for her now. Around her, the other staff whispered. One server scrolled through the TikTok reposts, eyes wide. Another young black barback came over and said, almost reverently, Was that you? That post? Naomi only nodded slightly. The barback let out a slow, impressed breath. Respect, he said, fist briefly touching his heart. Meanwhile, chaos had begun to ripple through the main venue. Chloe's wedding planner stormed past with a phone pressed to her ear, muttering in panic. No, we can't pull it now. The photographer's NDA doesn't cover guest posts. I don't know who filmed it. Margaret Whitmore, Chloe's mother, barked orders at a group of staff near the floral arch, demanding someone get ahead of this. Her face had gone from champagne pink to ash gray, but it was Chloe who took the biggest hit. She hadn't seen the full fallout yet. Not until one of her bridesmaids ran up to her mid-toast, phone in hand. Chloe, it's viral. Chloe blinked. What's viral? Her bridesmaid showed her the phone. Naomi could see Chloe's face from across the tent, the flicker of confusion, followed by the widening horror, then pure panic. Her voice was shrill even from a distance.
Turn it off. Turn it off. Who posted that? I want them sued.
But it was too late. The story had no breaks. Her own followers were turning on her. On Instagram, former brand partners commented things like, We're deeply disappointed, and reviewing our collaborations immediately. On TikTok, creators reenacted her now infamous line with biting sarcasm. Gotta show how diverse the wedding was. Cue record scratch and side-eye. Naomi sat quietly, watching the power shift not in a courtroom or on a stage, but in the court of public opinion, the fastest, fiercest justice system of the digital age. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But inside, a door long bolted by fear creaked open. This wasn't revenge. This was revelation. And yet, amidst the chaos, Naomi didn't feel finished. Not because she wanted to hurt Chloe, but because something deeper had awakened. She had spent years cloaking her brilliance in silence, believing invisibility was protection, but now her presence was being felt, without ever speaking her name. The wind shifted outside the tent, flapping the canvas slightly. A shadow moved across the flap. Naomi looked up. There, framed in sunlight, stood Leonard Vaughn. He stepped inside slowly, his eyes scanning the tent with quiet appraisal before landing on Naomi. "Miss Clark," he said, his voice smooth as aged bourbon, "I believe we have mutual business interests." Naomi stood, straightened her shoulders, and met his gaze. There was no fear in her eyes, only readiness. "Do we?" she asked coolly. Leonard smiled. "Yes, I believe we do, and I think today may have cleared the air for bigger things." Naomi tilted her head. "You're not here just for the wedding, are you?" Leonard's grin widened. "I'm here because brilliance tends to glow brightest in darkness. And you, my dear, are on fire." Before Naomi can reply, her phone buzzes again, this time with a notification that makes her breath hitch. "Vows Unveiled just tagged you by name. The anonymity is over." The moment Naomi read the notification, Vows Unveiled just tagged you by name, she felt her pulse throb beneath her skin. Her anonymity, her deliberate invisibility, had just shattered. Leonard Vaughn noticed her change in expression. "Is everything all right?" Naomi looked up at him, swallowing the quick tide of emotion. "It's fine," she replied quietly. "Just the sound of a mask cracking." Leonard smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's the only way anyone hears the truth." He gestured to a quiet corner outside the tent, a small seating area surrounded by rose hedges and shade. Naomi followed, every step heavy with memory. This man, once her father's fiercest competitor, now spoke to her not as a rival's daughter, but as a peer. They sat. Leonard leaned forward, folding his hands. "Let me cut through the pleasantries. I saw your name on the vendor list, and couldn't believe it. Naomi Clark, the same Clark who just closed that Fremont lot off-market? The same Clark behind Clark West Properties?" Naomi blinked. "You know about that?" He chuckled. "I don't show up at events unresearched. You've been building something most men 3 times your age couldn't replicate with a billion-dollar head start. Quietly, strategically, ruthlessly." His praise, while flattering, felt surreal. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "So what do you want, Mr. Vaughn?" "I want to offer you a seat at a different table," he said. "I'm assembling a team for a mixed-use development in downtown LA. 30 stories, part commercial, part luxury residential. We just lost our second-tier equity partner, and frankly, I'd rather bring in someone who understands the landscape." Naomi's breath caught. She didn't show it, but it hit her like thunder under calm skies. This wasn't just any offer. This was a generational leap. She'd always been strategic, buying underdog properties, flipping them, renting out before the neighborhoods caught on. But this would place her name on an LA skyline. "What made you think I'd be interested?" she asked, careful not to sound too eager. Leonard leaned back. "Because I saw how you handled her. That bride. You didn't explode. You didn't run. You let the system eat itself. That kind of poise under pressure. That's what builds towers." Naomi looked away briefly, out toward the rolling vineyard. "My father would have said I wasn't ready yet," she murmured. Leonard softened. "Your father played defense. You've mastered offense. He'd be proud, but more than that, he'd be learning from you right now." Naomi stared at the sky, searching through clouds for answers that no longer needed asking. She had spent so many years proving her worth in silence, hoping that being the smartest person in the room would eventually outweigh being the only black woman in it. But this was the door she'd been building for herself, and now someone with power was holding it open. She turned back to Vaughn. "What's the equity split?" He smiled like he'd been waiting for her to ask. 70-30. Your firm would oversee acquisition. Mine handles capital raise. We co-design. Launch in Q4. Naomi calculated quickly in her mind. The reach, the exposure, the political and social visibility it would bring. "Send me the numbers," she said finally. "I'll have my team look at the books Monday." Leonard's grin widened. Now that's the Clark I was hoping to meet. Just as Naomi extended her hand to shake on the intent, a voice, sharp, nasal, unmistakable, cut through the garden like a rusty blade.
Oh my God, what is this? A job interview.
Chloe stood a few feet away, arms crossed, bouquet limp at her side. Her face was red, part from champagne, part from digital humiliation. Naomi turned her head, expression unreadable. Just a conversation. Chloe snorted. Right. I'm sure Mr. Business over here came to scout real estate talent in the catering tent. Leonard stood, his posture regal. Actually, Chloe, this is Naomi Clark, founder of Clark West Properties. I've known her family for years. Chloe blinked, stunned. Wait, she's… what? She's more accomplished than anyone on your guest list, Leonard added. Naomi stayed seated, letting the weight of her silence speak louder than any retort. Chloe's laugh came out jagged. What could you possibly develop? A food truck? The moment was electric. Leonard's eyes narrowed. You're embarrassing yourself. But Naomi stood slowly, grace embodied. She stepped toward Chloe, voice calm as dusk. Funny. You mocked the help not knowing you were talking to the owner of one of the largest up-and-coming black-led real estate funds in Northern California. And just so you know, I already own 12% of this vineyard's land. You paid to host your wedding on my soil. Chloe's jaw slackened. Leonard gave a single nod. Send me your team's info, he said to Naomi. Then turned to Chloe. You should learn to read a room, especially when it's been bought by someone else. As Naomi walks away, her phone buzzes again. This time with a headline notification. Breaking bride from viral wedding video drops brand partnerships amid backlash. But just beneath it, another alert appears. Incoming offer on your Los Angeles lot. From Harper & Moore, Chloe's fiancé's company. Naomi didn't flinch when Chloe hurled the food truck comment. That would have given it weight. Instead, she let it hover for a moment, an insult too small to reach her altitude. Then, with the grace of someone who didn't need to shout to be heard, she turned fully toward the gathering audience that had begun to form around the garden archway. I'm Naomi Clark, she said evenly, founder and managing partner of Clark West Properties. The words hung in the summer air, like an unexpected gust, clean, deliberate, and utterly undeniable. A small gasp rippled through a trio of onlooking guests nearby. Two groomsmen glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. A bridesmaid with a crystal clutch froze mid-sip. Chloe's posture shifted an inch, as if her designer heels suddenly weren't steady enough to support her. Naomi stepped forward, not toward Chloe, but toward the guests. Not out of vanity. Out of clarity. Our firm holds over 30 properties in the Bay Area, including commercial lots, luxury condos, and a 12% land stake in this vineyard. That's why I know the weight of words in a space like this. And the cost when people use them, without care. Chloe's lips parted slightly. For once she had no curated response, no influencer wit, just stunned silence. And then, like a well-timed crescendo, Leonard Vaughn stepped beside Naomi. He turned to the guests, many of whom now whispered in murmured disbelief. I've worked with legends, he began, voice low and magnetic, and I'd still bet on her over anyone else here. His words were quiet, but they carried through the garden like gospel. Chloe blinked rapidly, trying to piece together the scene unraveling before her. This wasn't the plan. She was supposed to be the diamond at the center of the celebration, not the footnote to someone else's headline. You didn't say anything before, she muttered under her breath. Naomi glanced sideways. You never asked. It wasn't said with venom. There was no heat in her tone. Just fact. The kind that carved truth into stone. Around them, the whispers were turning into Google searches. Guests fumbled with their phones under napkins, typing in Naomi Clark real estate with wide eyes. The internet didn't lie. On Twitter, the trending hashtag now had a sub-trend. Naomi Clark. Post showed up with screenshots of news articles from small business journals, coverage from real estate expos, and one particularly viral photo of Naomi speaking at a panel at Stanford's Black Entrepreneurship Summit. Someone whispered aloud, "She's worth millions." Chloe looked like she might vomit. Margaret Whitmore, overhearing from a distance, clutched her pearls with slow dread. Her expression tightened as she realized her daughter's urban waitress might soon be featured on every news channel, as the woman who brought their entire facade crashing down. Naomi's eyes scanned the faces in the crowd. Some wore admiration, others wore guilt. Most just looked confused, unsure how to reconcile the woman serving hors d'oeuvre with the mogul now standing in their midst. But Naomi didn't need their validation. This wasn't for them. It was for every black girl ever told she needed to stay small, to stay safe. Excuse me, Naomi said softly, stepping past Chloe without another glance. She walked away from the archway slowly. Intentionally. She didn't strut. She didn't need to. Every step was a punctuation mark. But just before she reached the back of the reception tent, a voice called out to her, not loud, but pointed. Wait. Naomi turned. It was one of the bridesmaids' pale skin, honey blonde curls, wearing a satin dress that now looked slightly disheveled from too many rushed steps and too much anxiety. She hesitated before approaching Naomi, eyes darting to ensure no one else was listening. You don't know me, the woman said, barely above a whisper, but I need to tell you something. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Okay. The bridesmaid swallowed. I overheard Chloe talking about you. Earlier this week, during the final fitting. Before the wedding. Naomi said nothing, but her stillness was invitation enough. She said she hoped you didn't steal anything expensive. She joked that the staff should be told the security cameras work now. And then she said, you know how they get when they feel disrespected. A chill spidered down Naomi's spine, not because the words surprised her, but because of how freely they'd been spoken behind closed doors. She laughed when she said it. The bridesmaid added, like it was some inside joke, and the others, they didn't stop her. I didn't either. Naomi stared at her, no hate in her eyes, just weariness. Why are you telling me this now? The bridesmaid's voice cracked. Because watching you, just now, it made me ashamed. And I figured the least I could do was give you the truth. Naomi nodded slowly. Her voice when it came was heavy with the fatigue of centuries. Thank you for telling me, she said, each word deliberate. But shame without change doesn't help anyone. The bridesmaid looked down, chastened. Naomi didn't say more. There was nothing else to say. She turned to leave. But just then, as the soft jazz resumed, and the crowd returned to their curated rituals, her phone buzzed again. It was an anonymous message with an attached screenshot, Chloe's private group chat, and a voice memo titled, Her type always wants to feel important. The screen glowed cold in Naomi's palm, the white light making the surrounding garden feel darker, lonelier. Her breath caught in her throat as she pressed play on the attached voice memo. Chloe's voice filled the air, casual, confident, cruel. I mean, her type always wants to feel important, like you give them a tray and they think they own the estate. It's cute, but exhausting. The message ended with the click of a fake laugh, one Naomi had heard too many times in her life. The kind that cloaked supremacy and sarcasm. That old bitter brand of racism, where mockery passed as banter. But what followed next twisted the knife deeper. Attached beneath the voice memo was a series of screenshots. Naomi's eyes darted over each message, the words leaping off the screen like acid. Please tell me she's not on camera. I can't have someone that hood in my wedding photos. Watch her try to marry up next. Probably has 6 baby daddies and a weave bill bigger than her paycheck. I swear if anything goes missing, we'll know where to look. They were laughing. Laughing behind her back while she had worked quietly, efficiently, and with grace. The same grace they mistook for docility. Naomi's grip tightened around her phone, her thumb digging into the metal. Her heart didn't race. It burned. She had endured passive insults all day, from Chloe's whisper to the sneers disguised as jokes. But this wasn't microaggression. This wasn't ignorance. This was violent in its intention. Not physical violence. Something more corrosive. The kind of emotional vandalism that Black women were forced to sweep under the rug for centuries, all while being told to smile, stay grateful, stay quiet. Naomi didn't cry. Her face remained calm. But inside, a storm was swelling with purpose. She stepped behind the reception tent, away from the lights and string quartet, and sat on a low stone wall, near the vineyard's outer edge. The rows of grapes rustled gently in the wind, but the air felt still, dense with rage and decision. She scrolled through the screenshots again, slowly this time, not to dwell, to remember, to document. Each insult carved itself into her memory like graffiti on sacred ground. Each word made her posture straighter, her resolve harder. This wasn't about her ego. It never had been. It was about every Black woman who had ever been told she was too much, too loud, too proud, too ambitious, while others stole their labor, ideas, and brilliance and sold it back to the world with a smile and a stamp of whiteness. It was about the little girl, Amara, who had already learned that whiteness smiled while it cut. Naomi stood and took a long, slow breath. Her father once told her, "There's a time to play chess. Then there's a time to flip the board." Today was the latter. She pulled out her second phone, the business line she only used for deals. 1 ring. 2. "Jules," she said calmly, when her assistant answered. "I need you to do something. Immediately." She glanced back at the venue, at the white canopy, the clinking of champagne glasses, the illusion of class that had cloaked cruelty for hours. List the vineyard next week. Jules hesitated on the other end. Naomi, are you I'm done letting them eat from my plate while laughing at the cook. A long pause. Then Jules answered, it's done. Naomi hung up. Her phone buzzed again. A new text. Unknown number. Not everyone's going to like what you just did. Just be ready. Naomi stared at the message, then deleted it without blinking. She turned, slowly walking toward the reception again. Not because she wanted to, but because this story wasn't finished. Not yet. She had always planned to stay invisible. Let the work speak. Let the numbers win. But not anymore. Today she would be seen, not for revenge, but for reckoning. As she neared the edge of the party, the photographer caught sight of her and stepped forward. Half worried, half awed. You all right? She asked. Naomi nodded once. I'm clear. The photographer hesitated. You're really going to sell the land? Yes, Naomi said simply. But I'm not selling it to them. The photographer smiled faintly. Who then? Naomi didn't answer. Instead, she walked straight past Chloe's bridal party, all eyes darting toward her now, nervous, confused, and made her way to the front of the stage where the mic sat unused, abandoned after the early speeches. She paused. No announcement had been planned. No spotlight had been requested. But Naomi Clark didn't need permission anymore. She picked up the mic. The DJ cut the music with a confused glance, and slowly the guests began turning, one by one, toward the sound. Chloe was midway through a photo op when the silence rolled across the lawn. Naomi spoke into the mic, voice even and unshaken. Some of you don't know me, she began. And for most of the night, that was by design. People murmured. But tonight, she continued, someone showed me what this space really thinks of women like me. And I realized I no longer care to be polite about what I deserve. Or what I own. Her voice grew slightly louder. I'm not here for applause. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because silence has always protected the wrong people. Chloe was frozen mid-step. Her bridesmaids, pale with tension. And in case anyone was wondering, Naomi said, eyes sweeping the crowd, I'm no one's servant. I'm the investor who owns a portion of the land you're standing on. Gasps. I am Naomi Clark. Founder, CEO, property owner. And after tonight, landlord to none of you. Just as she sets the mic down and begins to walk away, a familiar male voice booms from the back of the crowd. You really think you're better than all of us? That money makes you worthy? Naomi turns to see Chloe's fiancé standing there, red-faced and furious. Naomi turned slowly, the vineyard light catching the subtle shimmer of power that now wrapped her like a second skin. Her expression didn't shift. It didn't need to. Across the wide lawn, eyes flicked between her and the man who had just challenged her. The groom, Evan Moore, heir to Harper and Moore Developments. His perfectly tailored tuxedo was wrinkled now. His tie loosened like he couldn't breathe in his own ceremony. Rage made his face red. But not just rage. Something more fragile. Panic. You really think you're better than all of us? He barked again, his voice cracking. That money makes you worthy? Naomi didn't flinch. She stepped down from the platform, each heel clicking with quiet resolve. The microphone still buzzed faintly behind her, as if even the tech itself hadn't caught up with what just happened. You mistook silence for absence, she said plainly. And assumed proximity meant permission. Evan scoffed, looking around, expecting backup. But even Chloe had frozen by now, white-knuckled, bouquet dangling like a burden in her hand. Her eyes searched the crowd for her mother, for the planner, for someone to fix this. But the crowd had changed. The room had flipped. There was no fixing this now. Let me explain something, Naomi continued, her tone now sharper, more surgical. When I invested in this estate 3 years ago, I did so under a subsidiary. Clark West owns 12% of Whitmore Hollow Vineyards, the exact portion used for private events. Evan's smirk faltered. Naomi continued, pulling her phone from her blazer with calm deliberation. And the event contract, which I reviewed this morning after the warm hospitality I received, includes a clause, section 14, line 7, allowing any minority stakeholder with verified equity to revoke hosting privileges for events with 6 hours notice in cases of ethical breach. A wave of gasps washed through the guests. Phones began to rise, silently recording what was no longer just a wedding, but a reckoning. Chloe's voice cracked into the silence. brittle and high. You can't do that. This is my wedding. Naomi tilted her head slightly. And yet it's my land. She tapped once on her phone. The call connected instantly. Jules. Enact the clause. I want security to begin vacating vendors within 30 minutes. Cancel music, catering, bar service. Send refunds where necessary. On the other end, her assistant responded, understood, already on it. Naomi hung up, tucked the phone away, and turned back toward the guests, not as a server, not as background, but as a woman reclaiming space stolen by centuries. The DJ cut the music mid-note. The violinist at the corner of the tent slowly lowered her bow. One by one, vendors froze. Chairs were abandoned. Champagne trays stopped circulating. A caterer turned to a guest and whispered, "She just shut it down." Evan stormed toward her, fists clenched but not raised. He didn't dare. He wasn't that stupid. But his voice trembled with a kind of fury that didn't know where else to go. "This is blackmail," he hissed. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "No. It's ownership. You ruined Chloe's day." Naomi smiled faintly. "She did that. I'm just ensuring it's remembered." Chloe now looked visibly panicked, her mascara threatening to betray her carefully curated lashes. Her mother appeared beside her, whispering in her ear furiously, gesturing toward Naomi like a problem to be escorted away. Naomi didn't move. "I wanted no part of the spotlight," she said, voice rising enough to reclaim attention. "But when silence becomes complicity, then silence is a weapon. And I don't believe in being unarmed anymore." The guests didn't clap. They didn't speak. They just watched as if witnessing the unraveling of a system too old to name, too rotten to keep standing. Naomi stepped toward the vendor tent where staff had gathered, many of them whispering, confused. She turned to the black barback she'd spoken with earlier. "You're done for the day," she said, handing him a folded tip envelope from her blazer. "Full rate. Take the rest of the staff with you. Tell the manager Naomi Clark, close the books early." He stared at her, eyes wide. "You just shut down a rich white wedding." "No," she said softly. "I shut down disrespect." He nodded, lips pressed tight to keep the emotion in, and turned to gather the others. The Latina server, the one who'd trembled earlier, looked at Naomi like she was watching someone step out of a storybook into real life. Within 20 minutes, the operation slowed to a halt. Florists packed their leftover blooms. Bartenders covered open bottles. The string lights flickered off one by one, like a silent curtain call. Chloe stood in the center of it all, the lace of her custom gown now stained by soil, her veil tossed aside in a forgotten chair. She no longer looked like a bride. She looked like someone who had finally been seen through. Naomi returned once more to the platform, not to speak, but to stand. Because sometimes, presence is the only protest that matters. And then, a sharp intake of breath behind her. Naomi turned to see a screen being held up toward the crowd. A live feed had just gone viral. Chloe, earlier that morning, saying on camera, "If they don't like it, they can go back to the hood where they came from." The venue gasped in one voice, and Naomi's phone buzzed again with a call from CNN newsroom. The screen was still raised high above the crowd, frozen mid-frame on Chloe's face. The audio had played moments earlier, grainy but unmistakable. Her voice sharp, gleeful, dripping with disdain. "If they don't like it, they can go back to the hood where they came from." The silence that followed was not the quiet of uncertainty. It was the kind that blooms only in the moments before collapse, the breath held between dignity and disgrace. Naomi stood still at the edge of the vineyard platform, flanked by shocked wedding guests, disoriented staff, and 1,000 cameras disguised as cell phones. Her own phone buzzed in her pocket, the words CNN newsroom flashing like a siren she wasn't ready to answer. She didn't need to, because the truth was already out. She stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the vineyard soil, the same soil she partially owned. She reached for the microphone left abandoned on the wine barrel podium, her fingers steady. She lifted it slowly, like a final gavel. "I wasn't going to say anything more," Naomi began, her voice low but clear, "because I thought the silence was enough. But silence is how things like this keep happening." Chloe froze a few feet away, her body stiff, jaw clenched in visible disbelief that the day had spiraled so far beyond her control. Her bridesmaids stood behind her like fallen dominoes, unsure whether to stand with her or step away. Naomi turned to face the entire crowd. "You mocked the help," she said, not looking directly at Chloe. You mocked the people who made your celebration possible, from the floral team to the food runners. You mocked me not knowing who I was, not caring, and when you thought no one was watching, you showed exactly who you are. Russ. Gasps and murmurs rippled again. Naomi let the silence return, not as weakness but punctuation. I didn't need to be seen today. I was happy to serve. But what I won't do, what none of us should do, is let disrespect masquerade as tradition, or racism hide behind celebration. A man near the center coughed awkwardly, glancing at his wife. A woman nearby fidgeted with her napkin, her eyes darting to her phone, unsure whether to film or flee. I am Naomi Clark, she continued, a property owner, investor, and founder of Clark West. And whether you knew it or not, you hosted this wedding on land I partially own. The weight of that sentence landed hard. Some people visibly blinked in disbelief. Others looked toward Chloe and her family, as if asking, is that true? And if you think wealth protects you from being held accountable, Naomi added, her voice sharper now, then you don't understand what power really looks like. Her eyes swept the lawn. Power is choosing not to humiliate you, even when I could. Power is giving you grace after you offered me contempt. And power, she said slowly, is knowing I never needed your validation to begin with. A beat of silence, and then a smattering of applause. It started with the staff. The black barback from earlier clapped once. Then again, a young caterer joined in, eyes wide with awe. Then a guest near the back, moved by something beyond etiquette, raised her hands to clap too. And then half the lawn erupted in applause. Some hesitated, unsure. Others joined reluctantly. But the line had been drawn, not in anger, but in undeniable truth. Naomi didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply turned and set the microphone down, with quiet finality, a gesture more powerful than a shout. Behind her, Chloe's face was twisted in something between horror and disbelief. This was her wedding, her curated fairy tale, and yet the story belonged to someone else now. The headline, the movement. Before she could recover, before she could issue some hollow plea for misunderstanding, Evan, her fiancé, approached, slow and tight-lipped. He didn't look at Naomi. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at Chloe. You ruined everything, he whispered, his voice cold and cracked. Chloe blinked. Evan? No, he cut her off, sharper than she expected. You ruined everything. The brand, my name. My company is all over Twitter as complicit in a racist meltdown. She reached for him. Panicked. This wasn't me. Someone twisted it. No one twisted anything, he spat. You said those things. You laughed while you said them. And you made a fool of me while doing it. More phones came up. Some people recorded openly now. Others stepped away, not wanting to be part of the backlash. Naomi remained at the edge of the crowd, quietly watching Chloe's world unravel without lifting a finger. It was all happening organically now. The system correcting itself, piece by poisoned piece. You humiliated me, Evan hissed under his breath. You think anyone's going to trust my name after this? Chloe's eyes welled. I didn't mean... You meant all of it, he said, stepping back. And now I have to clean it up. And then without another word, Evan turned and walked away. Past the tables, past the photographers, past the storybook arch, now wilted by truth. Chloe stood frozen. Alone. Naomi looked at her one last time. There was no hatred in her eyes, only finality. She turned toward the barback. Make sure the staff is paid double, she said. This day didn't deserve them, but they deserved better from it. He nodded, still stunned. Naomi's phone buzzed again. CNN's voicemail. She ignored it. This moment didn't need national attention. It needed something quieter, something more sacred. Naomi walked through the crowd with slow, steady grace. Some guests nodded at her as she passed. Others avoided her gaze. And a few whispered thank you, like it was a confession. She didn't acknowledge any of it. She had said what needed to be said. But just before she reached the gravel path toward the exit, a petite woman stepped out from the crowd, Amara's mother. Her eyes were glassy, but strong. Thank you, she said, voice low but fierce, for showing my daughter what power looks like. Naomi nodded once. She already knew. She just needed to see it in motion. As Naomi stepped away toward the vineyard gate, a man in a gray suit rushed after her with an envelope. This was left for you, he said, breathless. She opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten note. You made a lot of enemies today. Be careful who you trust next. By Monday morning, Chloe Whitmore's wedding had become a cultural landmark for all the wrong reasons. The image of her smug expression next to the black flower girl, paired with the viral video and Naomi's now iconic mic drop, made its way across every major social platform with alarming speed. Twitter renamed her Jen racist bride. Instagram meme pages layered text over her wedding photos. POV, you paid 80 DKL to get evicted by a waitress. Late-night comedians took turns sinking their teeth in. One host quipped, Chloe tried to serve class at her wedding, but forgot her racism was showing. Another joked, apparently the bride wore Vera Wang and a white hood underneath. The audience howled. The internet did too. By Wednesday, 3 of Chloe's brand deals had publicly pulled out. One issued a statement, we do not tolerate racial bias or performative diversity. Our collaboration with Ms. Whitmore has ended, effective immediately. She was hemorrhaging followers. Her meticulously curated feed now looked like a graveyard of cringes. Comment sections that once overflowed with heart emojis and praise were now flooded with clown emojis, snake gifs, and phrases like read the room sis. Chloe tried to pivot, posting an apology video in a beige cashmere sweater, seated in a tastefully neutral kitchen. I just want to say I'm sorry if anyone was offended, she began, blinking slowly. I'm learning and unlearning every day. The comments eviscerated her. You weren't unlearning when you said go back to the hood. This isn't a notes app apology. This is a career autopsy. The problem isn't what you said. It's that you meant it. Her tears didn't land. Her PR team had lost control. The wedding that was supposed to launch her influencer lifestyle brand had become her digital obituary. Meanwhile, Naomi sat at her desk in her Oakland office, the midday sun filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her office was minimalist, quiet, anchored by books on black enterprise, civil resistance, and real estate law. She scrolled slowly through the avalanche of emails, messages, and DMs pouring into her inbox. Some were business inquiries, others were press requests. But the ones that mattered most weren't from networks or magazines. They were from black girls. Hundreds. Thousands. You made me feel visible. I've swallowed so much at my job. Thank you for reminding me. I'm not crazy.
They laughed at me in law school.
This week, they retweeted you.
That flower girl, I was her once. Now I want to become you. Naomi read each one slowly. She didn't reply to all, but she archived every single message in a folder labeled Legacy. She wasn't trying to be a symbol. She wasn't trying to go viral. She had stood up because the silence became unbearable. And now that voice was reverberating far beyond what she ever expected. Leonard Vaughn had already scheduled a private dinner for Thursday night. We're still on, he texted. But we're going to need a bigger table. Her assistant had forwarded 3 new development proposals. The most promising came from a group in Atlanta, a women of color-led coalition, offering a 6-building commercial project near the Beltline. Naomi smiled. She hadn't planned this moment. But maybe it had been coming all along. Still, the storm hadn't passed. On Friday morning, as she approached her black BMW parked in the garage beneath her office building, Naomi noticed something wedged beneath the windshield wiper. An envelope. It was stark white. No name. No markings. Her stomach knotted. Not with fear, but with a bone-deep weariness. She scanned the surrounding cars. No movement. No witnesses. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, written in messy all-caps Sharpie. You're not safe. Stay out of our circles. No return address. No signature. Just the ugly truth laid bare in 7 words. Naomi stood still. She'd always known that stepping into her full power would come at a cost. But seeing it this blunt, this cowardly, reminded her that not every institution was made of walls. Some were made of people, and when you refused to kneel before them, they didn't just resent you, they feared you. She tucked the envelope into her briefcase, her face impassive. No one watching would have seen a tremor. But inside, her thoughts turned flint hard. This wasn't intimidation. It was validation. Her existence was disruptive. Her voice was a threat. Her success a rebellion. But it was also protection. She was no longer just a quiet entrepreneur. She was a symbol now. Not because she wanted to be, but because others needed her to be. Naomi walked to her office, dialed her security advisor, and scheduled a review. Then she called Jules. I need you to pull the security footage from the parking structure, she said calmly, and file a report anonymously. Already on it, Jules replied. Naomi hung up. She stood by the glass window of her office, watching the city move below. Cars honking, people walking. The everyday chaos of a world that kept spinning even after the fault lines cracked. She stared at her reflection, sharp, still beautiful in its defiance. Her phone buzzed again, a new email, this time from a blocked address. The subject line read, "You don't know what Chloe's family owns, but you're about." Naomi stood in the center of her glass-walled office, the city stretching beyond her in layers of steel, smoke, and stories. Her gaze drifted toward the skyline, a terrain she'd long studied, invested in and slowly come to own, parcel by quiet parcel. But today it felt heavier, less a monument, more a battleground. The email still glared on her screen. "You don't know what Chloe's family owns, but you're about to." No body text. No sender traceable through ordinary means. Just that sentence, hanging like a veiled threat. Naomi took a steady breath. The silence of her office made it feel like the walls themselves were listening. She clicked the message closed, then moved to her desk and retrieved the other envelope, the one found beneath her windshield wiper just days earlier. "You're not safe. Stay out of our circles." 7 words. The boldest font of cowardice. She was not shaken. But she wasn't naive either. By the end of the day, she had hired a private security detail, not to protect herself from the physical world, but from the shadows that thrived behind money, legacy, and unchecked power. Her assistant Jules contacted 2 former FBI consultants, now specializing in high-profile harassment cases. Naomi also started documenting everything. Emails, letters, social media threats, encrypted leaks. She began building a private archive. Not for pity, for protection, for proof. She remembered her father's words, spoken from a hospital bed whose beeping had felt louder than grief. "One day they'll come for you. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you represent. Don't bow, Naomi. Rise." He'd spoken them with clarity, his hand thin and veined, gripping hers like an anchor before drifting away for the last time. Naomi had built everything on those words. Every investment, every hire, every move. But now, as the world tried to shove her back into the shadows, she realized rising wasn't enough. She had to lift others with her. By Thursday, Clark West Properties announced the launch of a new fund, the Rise Initiative, a $2 million seed program to help young women of color break into commercial real estate, mentorship, education, seed capital, legal workshops, full wraparound services. The press release made headlines, but it was the mission that made impact. Naomi's inbox flooded again, this time from women across the country who had spent years circling the margins of power, waiting for a door to open that wasn't guarded by old money or quiet bigotry. She didn't just answer them. She built a bridge. By Friday afternoon, Leonard Vaughn called. "You're rewriting how this game is played," he said, his voice reverent, not performative. "And I want in. Not just on the LA deal, on the initiative." Naomi agreed, under one condition. No oversight, no strings, no old men in the boardroom deciding what black women need. Vaughn chuckled. "Then we're aligned." But even as her empire expanded, the shadows kept moving. The media frenzy around Chloe hadn't quieted. Her sponsors continued to withdraw. Influencers began distancing themselves like it was radioactive fallout. Her wedding had become a case study in privilege undone. Then came the real twist. On Saturday night, Naomi's phone buzzed at 11:12. Unknown number. No subject. No greeting. Just a single sentence. "She wants to talk. Chloe." Naomi paused, then stared at the phone like it might crack in her hand. For a moment, she said nothing. Did nothing. Then a second message arrived. Not an apology. "She's desperate. Wants to meet. Says it's urgent." Naomi sat down, her fingers tightening. She had faced rich girls like Chloe her entire life. The ones who thought being cruel was clever. Who believed owning wealth meant owning the room, the narrative, even the people inside it. But never had one of them broken character long enough to beg. Not for forgiveness, but for help. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voice note. Naomi hesitated before pressing play. Chloe's voice crackled through the speaker, lower now, thinner, all the arrogance stripped bare. "I know you probably hate me. You should. But please, I didn't know this would get this big. They're threatening to pull the family trust. Evan left. My mom's disowning me. I can't breathe without it trending. I just need help. I need an out. Please." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even remorse. It was self-preservation. Pure, and panicked. Naomi sat still, listening not just to the words, but to the silence between them, the space where sincerity should have lived. She didn't feel joy. Not vindication. Only clarity. Chloe wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry the world had stopped protecting her from the consequences. Naomi's phone buzzed again. It was a video attachment. Chloe recorded secretly, in a dimly lit room, whispering into her phone. "If she doesn't help me, we'll destroy her. She has no idea what my family is capable of." It was just past 7:30, on a Monday evening when Naomi arrived at the meeting spot. A once luxurious rooftop lounge, overlooking downtown San Francisco. The skyline burned gold under the setting sun, but the room inside felt cold, empty. Glass tables, velvet booths, champagne flutes that hadn't seen champagne in months. It had the hollow sheen of wealth, trying to remember what it felt like. Chloe was already seated near the far end, barely recognizable. Her makeup was minimal, or maybe just unfinished. Her posture, once pageant stiff, sagged like her world had finally caught up to her. She looked like a person who hadn't slept in weeks. When Naomi entered, Chloe stood abruptly, as if programmed by muscle memory. "Naomi," she said, her voice brittle. Naomi didn't extend a hand. She didn't even sit right away. She studied the woman in front of her, the one who had once whispered cruelty like perfume in her ear, then posted smiling photos with the very people she demeaned. Now that woman was unraveling. Publicly, completely. "You wanted to talk," Naomi said. Chloe nodded quickly. "Yes. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I mean, after everything." Naomi held up a hand. "Let's skip the warm-up. Say what you came to say." Chloe swallowed hard, twisting a gold ring on her finger, a ring Naomi recognized from the wedding. Funny how some things survived disgrace longer than dignity. "My family's estate," Chloe began, voice cracking. It's in danger. The vineyard, the surrounding land, everything." Naomi said nothing. Chloe pressed on. "Investors have pulled out. My mother's name is poison in the press. The trust's board wants to dissolve holdings in California altogether. My father's legacy stopped being your priority the day you built your reputation on mockery," Naomi said flatly. Chloe flinched. I know I messed up. I wasn't thinking. I didn't know you were." Naomi's eyes hardened. "Stop. Right there." Chloe froze. "That's the part you still don't get," Naomi continued, her tone razor sharp. "It wasn't what you said because I'm wealthy, or because I'm successful, or because I turned out to be someone you couldn't step on without consequence. It's what you said because you believed I was nobody. That's who you truly are." Chloe sank back into her seat, mascara smudging slightly beneath her eyes. "I'm not that person," she said quietly. "At least, I don't want to be." Naomi finally sat down across from her, leaned in slightly. "Then why ask me for help before doing the work to become someone else?" Chloe looked up, confused. Naomi's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You think because I walked away with grace I'll extend that same grace to save your name," Naomi said. "But I'm not here to fix the life you wrecked. I just..." Chloe's voice cracked. "I need a partner. Someone who knows how to rebuild. Your network." Naomi exhaled slowly. "You taught me something," she said, her voice low. "You taught me what white fragility looks like when it's stripped of power. What desperation sounds like when the mask falls off. What happens when people like you realize the institutions that protected your ugliness have abandoned you." Chloe's mouth parted, but no words came. Naomi leaned forward, meeting her eye. "But you also reminded me of something I almost forgot. That I don't owe respect to people who weaponized my silence. That my worth isn't tied to how kindly I forgive cruelty." Tears began to spill down Chloe's cheeks. Silently at first, she didn't even wipe them. There was nothing performative about them anymore. Just the raw fear of someone who'd lost everything, and still didn't understand why. Naomi stood. "You want my advice?" Chloe nodded, barely holding herself together. "Clean up your soul," Naomi said, "before trying to clean your name." She turned and walked away, heels echoing softly against the polished marble. Chloe didn't follow.
There was no redemption arc here, no dramatic hug, no Hollywood rescue.
Just a woman reclaiming her boundaries and leaving another to sit in the wreckage of her own making. As Naomi exited the lounge, her phone vibrated. She expected another news alert. Maybe another request for a speaking engagement or panel appearance, but it wasn't. It was an email from an anonymous tip line. Subject: The Whitmore family's hidden deals in City Hall. Naomi opened the attached PDF, and her breath caught. Inside were leaked documents, zoning privileges, tax shelter agreements, and confidential memos tying Chloe's family to a string of shady development projects in Oakland, including land Naomi had just bid on. Naomi stared at the PDF, each page a landmine in the hands of the wrong person, or the right one. Memos, emails, contracts with suspicious timestamps, tax incentives funneled through shell LLCs. And worst of all, property acquisitions with forged signatures, zoning variances granted overnight by developers tied to Chloe's father's old political connections.
One of the parcels? A coveted corner lot Naomi had bid on 2 years ago and lost.
Now, it made sense. This wasn't just racism masquerading as elitism. It was corruption cloaked in exclusivity. And Naomi had the receipts. She could go to the press, leak the documents, burn the Whitmore name down to ash. But she didn't. Not yet. Because Naomi Clark didn't need fire to prove her worth. She carried the storm with style, in heels, in silence, and in power. 3 weeks passed, then 4. The wedding fallout faded from tabloid rotations, but flourished in academic circles, think pieces, and DEI forums nationwide. Naomi's name appeared in essays titled Grace Under Fire, a case study in Black womanhood and reclamation. She didn't grant interviews. She didn't write a memoir. She just built. Her firm, Clark West, tripled in valuation after the announcement of the Rise Initiative. Investors, once hesitant, now called her. Panel requests poured in, some from institutions that had ignored her earlier pitches. She rejected most of them. But when Forbes called, she said yes. The cover featured her in a structured white blazer, standing atop a downtown balcony, the Oakland skyline blurred behind her. The headline read, "The Quiet Architect: How Naomi Clark Redefined Power on Her Own Terms." 2 months later, she took the TEDx stage in Chicago, wearing a red jumpsuit that caught the light with every step. Her speech didn't mention Chloe. It didn't mention the vineyard, but it pulsed with subtext, so sharp the crowd held their breath from the first sentence. "Silence isn't surrender," she said. "Sometimes it's strategy." She spoke about generational wealth, about Black women navigating boardrooms with code switching and composure, about reclaiming space in industries built to shut them out. She never raised her voice, but when she ended with "Own your story, then own the room," the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Her inbox exploded. Real estate collectives, urban planning think tanks, young women in Detroit, Memphis, Harlem, and Watt. They didn't want her celebrity. They wanted her blueprint. Naomi gave it freely. Through mentorships. Through Rise-funded scholarships. Through lunch meetings. With 20-year-old interns who couldn't yet see their brilliance, but saw it reflected in her. Her grandmother's voice echoed often. Dignity is armor. But Naomi had become more than armor. She was blueprint and builder, myth and material, warning and welcome. One evening, as she walked out of a speaking engagement in D.C., heels clacking softly on the marble steps of Howard's Business School, she passed a mural painted near the street's edge. It was fresh, bright. A Black girl stood tall in the center, brown skin luminous beneath a crown of sunflowers. In her hands, a deed to a home. In the corner, spray painted in looping gold script, "Power isn't loud, it's undeniable." Naomi blinked, something tightening in her chest. She said nothing, but she took a photo. Later that night, she sat in her apartment overlooking Lake Merritt, sipping chamomile tea, barefoot for the first time in days. Her inbox pinged. A new subject line appeared. Yale Commencement 2026. Guest speaker invitation. Naomi Clark. Her chest rose, then fell. She opened it slowly, reading the words twice. They wanted her to deliver the keynote address. 10 years after she walked the campus trying not to be noticed. Yale was now asking her to be unforgettable. She looked out the window, the city glittering like opportunity reborn. Naomi clicked reply, then paused. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard when a new notification popped up. A second message, sent just minutes later from a blocked account. "Speak all you want, but don't forget, we still have the original." They laughed at her apron, not knowing she owned the ground beneath their feet. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about every Black woman forced to swallow dignity for peace. If you've ever felt unseen in a room you helped build, type yes. If silence should never be the price of respect. Subscribe if her strength moved you.